field any questions that the audience has, you're welcome to just raise your hand and stand up and voice your question. Irene.
Well, actually, this is for Randy. And about a week or so ago, I was on television where the Shoreline District just built a $95 million state-of-the-art high school. But they didn't come to the local taxpayers. How was that done?
I have no idea. Because that doesn't, I'll check it out and I'll give you an answer. But the only way I would believe that could be done is they passed a bond issue and said, when needed, we will use it. And so, because you have a general fund budget that you use, and then you have a capital fund budget. So you have to use your money out of the capital fund budget. Now, Shoreline's district is part of Linwood District, and so I just want you to know that I think this might be the answer, but it's only an opinion, okay? Linwood High School is in Shoreline School District, and the big mall that's in their district right on I-5, I can't think of the mall right now, but it's just north of Seattle, and it's on the left. And Linwood High School was on one of the most expensive pieces of property a public school is on, and I think they sold that to part of the mall company and a developer, and they were able to take the money they got from that school and that property, and were able to build a new high school. That is in the cobwebs of my brain, that I went and visited that school about 3.5 years ago, and they were in the process of putting that up for sale. So I believe that was Linwood High School.
Well, the way that they reported it made it sound like they did not come to the local taxpayers for that money.
Right.
So it would be interesting to know exactly how they did it and how other schools could follow.
No, I don't. I actually believe that's the case. That it was a very expensive piece of property that's right next. Is it not the Linwood Mall? Alderwood Mall. And if you know where I'm talking about, as you came off the freeway, right on the other side was Linwood High School, and it's no longer there. Yeah. Alderwood Mall, you're right. So I believe that's how they did it. I don't know of any other district, but I'll check on it and I'll give you a definite answer.
Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to know,
I don't hear
on teacher evaluations, do you believe that there should be a process to weed out bad teachers, instead of passing them down to the school district? 2 years later they find out they got a bad teacher,
Okay. First of all, I believe every kid should have a quality teacher. And 2 years ago, the legislature and myself and the governor worked on a new evaluation system that I think is much more robust than our past evaluation system that was done over 30 years ago. And the rubrics, I had to pick up to 3, and we picked Marzano and Danielson are the 3 deep from the University of Washington. We're going through the training process right now. And I think we'll have a clear picture of what good teaching is. And we'll have a clear path. And I do believe, and there's going to be a piece of legislation to change, that an element of the evaluation should be that we use assessment data as an element of the evaluation. So, yes, I'm a former principal. I didn't want to have bad teachers, and it was difficult. But I think the idea of our evaluation should be to first improve the teacher and make them better. But if we do have low-performing teachers, we should make the effort to have a...
Well, it's the question, a fifth grade teacher, no science is taught till the 5th grade, and hold that person accountable for the lack of science being taught. How do you do something like that? When no science was taught, and then the 5th grade teacher is being held to that standard.
Well, I think there is, when Randy made that reference to science sometimes doesn't get taught until the 5th grade. That's a district by district decision. Some districts have to make difficult decisions like that. I was a principal of the school in Grandview, and we were significantly underperforming in reading and math, so we had to find some time. And so science became less of a priority for us, but that was a local decision. That doesn't exist here. We teach science, at our levels prior to fifth grade, but it is a district by district. Doesn't make it right, but it is a practice that has been practiced. But Randy's position and our position is it's a priority from the get-go. Yes.
So this bottom line is 27 million. What is the interest on that?
The interest on
Or
that,
is that with the interest in it?
yeah, that's it. We would borrow in bonds $27 million to build the school. And the taxable rate on how we project the $27 million, I think it's a very fair current assessment of market assessment. In year one, you have to take what we would potentially pay or ask our taxpayers to pay of the $1.33 calculation. We want to be fair with that. And so year one, it's of assessed valuation across our county, it's a minus 6.13% of property values. So we're subtracting property values in year one to say, want to make sure that rate is accurate, because if we over project that, it comes in at a higher rate. It come in at $1.50. And then taxpayers say, well, wait a minute, he said $1.33. So we've already factored in the actual percentage decrease that we've seen this year of 6.13. Now, next year, we are projecting another 2% decrease. And in year three, starting to level off and then look at a slow increase over time. So we believe, based on the work we've done to project out the years of repayment of this bond, to be at $1.33 to be pretty fair and accurate.
The Pioneer is one of the schools that has all-day kindergarten. And from an outsider's point of view, I think teachers are unfairly expected to teach social skills, etc., for children who are not prepared properly by the parents. It's not a slam against parents. What is your plan? Are you using the all-day kindergarten to incorporate some of that, to take some of that off of so the teachers can teach subjects?
So, first of all, what I want you to know is that a number of my goals, one of the things is I'm responsible for K through 12, but I really understand that we're going to have to expand our early learning programs. We call it social, emotional, and academic, that we look at the whole child, and we really work on those social skills and emotional skills, and we need more help in those areas, because when students come to the Washington public school system ready to learn, I want you to know we do a great job. They graduate, they do well. But when kids come to us that are behind, either socially, academically, or emotionally, we tend to somewhat struggle to get them caught up, and they tend to sometimes be a challenge for us to actually work with, and it hurts some of the education of the other kids. So I'm a big person in investing in early childhood education, and I think the legislature, I'm going to pat them on the back. They recognize that all-day kindergarten is very important. 5 years ago, we were at 0% state paid for all-day kindergarten. You know what districts had all-day kindergarten? Were districts like Bellevue. Bellevue, for 14 years, has had all-day kindergarten. What do you think that does to third grade reading scores? They bounce up. So the legislature made the decision 5 years ago to pay for all-day kindergarten. 5 years ago and 4 years ago, they got up to 22%. And then we had this little thing called like an economic meltdown, because we had a little problem on state budgets. And that was put on hold until this last biennium. This last biennium, we went from 22% to 43% of the schools having all-day kindergarten. The goal is by 2018 is to get to 100% of paid all-day kindergarten. And yes, part of kindergarten is not just academics, it's a social and emotional and the whole child skills. so that they have the capability of learning. And with high class size, I'll just be flat honest with people, you know, classroom management is a big piece of educating students. And so the better behaved kids are, the more socially adjusted they are, the better off we are.
I'm going to go a little bit into that as well from a local perspective. Our board has been very proactive at making sure that we invest very highly in early childhood education, i.e., 2 years ago we decided to take local and state BEA dollars and start a preschool program that was funded by BEA and local funds. So last year we were able to address the primary school. I think it was 28 4-year-olds in our community to come in as a 4-year-old child and experience a year of school prior to even being a kindergartner. So this year we were lucky enough to apply for a grant and get an ECAP funded grant that added additional funds to our early learning program, and we were able to add an additional 18 4-year-olds into our program. So we have the potential, we have kind of 3 phases of funding available to even 4-year-olds. Is our basic money that we've set aside that we've had to commit. I mean, you got to choose where you spend your money, and we've chosen to invest early. But our basic money, our ECAP money, and also our developmental dollars that come out of the SPED program to give us kind of 3 layers of being able to offer programs to our students. As well as we were one of those districts that have now full day K. So we have the potential of having all our 4-year-olds in class for 1 year prior to kindergarten, and that being now full day K. And so we're really excited about that. I think if there's models across the state, Randy, we're on the leading edge of those models because we have a very aggressive early intervention program. So put us on the map on that one, okay? And to reflect also what Randy said about social and emotional, that's a big part of what we do. We have positive behavior supports in our system, and we're learning as an educational system not to just intervene academically, but also intervene with what the child needs, and sometimes that's social and emotional support. And we have to, in some cases, stand up for that child when a parent doesn't have the capacity to do that. Again, fairness, is not always equal. We want to intervene with what the child needs. And our staff here is phenomenal. From top to bottom, from classified to bus driver, we've invested highly in our staff, and our staff is as professional as they come at intervening and giving that child what he or she needs.
Yeah, and the research shows that the age appropriateness is most of the recommendations are elementary, basically K through 4. K through 5, and then the middle school is 6th, 7th, and 8th. And obviously, my hometown's Puyallup, and they're going through a real battle right now because they're the last school district basically around that's a 7 through 9 type of program. And there's the argument of 9th graders going up, and is that appropriate, what they're going to be exposed to? But really, it's more appropriate that group. The research shows that it's more appropriate that age group. K through 5 is more appropriate. 6th, 7th, and 8th, because for whatever reason, physically, kids start changing more in the 6th grade than, I think it was more 7th and 8th graders started changing when I was at school. But the hormones are different, and the development of students, not only emotionally and academically, but it's physically too. And so that's a pretty big considerable change there. And so it just seems like all the research and all the stuff that I've looked at is that that's a better match for students. Yeah. I don't have that on my fingertips, but I believe it.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm fired. You know what you call the government?
What now, sir? I said, well, I always, I got, this is an inside joke a little bit, but you know Danny Coyne, right? Danny Coyne. His mom hated writing a Christmas letter and saying that her son was a lobbyist for Derek Gold and for these different companies. So I said, just write in your Christmas letter that your son's a government information specialist for Derek Gold, Bank of America, and that. Because when you use lobbyists, people kind of a negative thing. But
Well, before I became government information specialist, I know that I was the director of the Teachers Association in Belgium.
oh, okay.
We were very much involved in supporting the levies there, and also got politically involved in changing the levy to 50%.
Right.
And why we didn't throw in the bonds, I don't know.
Yeah.
But is there any hope that we should ever get that down to 50%?
Okay. Here's the question. State law states that to pass a bond, it's 60%, what we call a supermajority. And it used to be to pass a levy. People forget that that was only about 8 years ago that we lowered the levy. Huh? It was about 8 years. I was at PSC when we did it. So, well, you're right. It's probably about 2002. So about 11 years. Years go together when you get my age. But about 11. But it really was only about, I think, about 10 years ago that we switched. The levies went from 60% to 50%. Okay, and there's argument on both sides. But the argument that I heard Gary Locke use, that he was the governor then, is that basically people felt that the polling showed that about 65-70% of the people thought that levy should go down to 50%. Because that was usually a 2-year vote or a 3-year vote for levies. But because bonds were a 25-year commitment, you should try to ensure that you got a supermajority to commit for that long. That's the argument that I heard Gary use. Okay. Now, I believe that we're built on a democracy and that 50% should rule the day, but I don't see that coming. The 50% vote for levies only passed with about 51.2% vote. So they felt like if they put levies on that they wouldn't have made it. Now there has been talk. I know that California went from 60% to 55% on their bonds. And so they didn't lower it all the way, but they kind of met halfway and got an agreement halfway. And that's part of the legislative process, is negotiations and compromise. But I know that is one state that about 10 years ago, right when we did the levy down to 50%, they went down to 55%.
I raised my kids in the Dallas School District, and at that time I was very active in the classrooms, and I was amazed to see what had been put into general education as far as who they were accommodating in the basic classes, because kids were allowed, like so, to be able to take part in classrooms no matter what the disabilities were.
Yep.
The teachers were in a position, and I was amazed with this, when they were having to change diapers. And kids that should have been obviously whatever, and in a lifestyle that I grew up in, things were kind of sequestered out of that. And it was amazing to me to see that, but also I think that a lot of people are not aware that exactly how some of these teachers are adapting and teaching to now, as opposed to what they were doing when they themselves went to school. And I'm not sure when those changes were. Maybe you can speak to that and what that really does to performance as accessibility and school.
The language is the less Least restrictive environment is the federal law. And so we've had to adjust in the public school system and you know, where you draw that line of who's in there and least restrictive and can the teacher handle it and stuff, it is a tough line to draw because you also want to be accommodating to people with disabilities so they're part of our society and they're contributing part of their society and they see themselves as valued and can be part of the regular community and strive to become, you know, contributors and can do something and be employable. So there's that fine line that every school district and every principal kind of has to draw that line of what we believe we can handle. And so that's what we would say. And like I said, I want people to understand something. In this country, we say education is for who? For everybody. For all students. And it should be equal access for all students. Now, we're not perfect at it, but we're a lot farther along at that than any other country in this world. And we do not restrict and keep kids at home. And I worked at Rainier State School when they had over 1,100 students, okay, in the summertime. And today I think they have about 160 students. So we moved those to group homes and back into the family, and they're in our public school system. And yes, they create challenges, and yes, they create cost expenditures. But as an overall society, I think it leans on the positive side of things, and we're accepting of people and their differences. And so I know it's a fine line, and it's a tough call for local people, but those are the calls. And that's what we handle at the state level, working with parents of wanting their students into the regular classroom, but then trying to draw that fine line of what's the most appropriate placement for that child.
Can you speak to where that transition happened to where the time frame was 1970, where everything got mainstreamed a little bit more? And where I'm basically going at is, where does this fall into when this facility was created, and the new challenges that comes with that? We do not have bathrooms, we do not have everything that I saw we needed in Maple Valley. I do not see here.
And I think that's one of the reasons that you're actually trying to make that move, kind of update yourselves to those new laws. It was in about the mid-'80s is when those laws changed, because I remember we were putting in ramps to classrooms, you know, that only had stairs before. Over the summer, we had to put in ramps when I was the high school principal in the right around 83, 84, 85. And we had a second floor building, and we didn't have an elevator. And so we had to move all the classrooms for our paraplegic student. We had to move the teacher down to the ground floor and move him out of the classrooms. And why do you know? I had battles with teachers. Well, why do I put him in another classroom? You know, no, that's how it fits in his schedule. We're going to move you to accommodate. So there was some real battles going on. Even outside, making teachers not have a smoking room. That was one of them. So, you know, I think it was the 80s. So those accommodations. The federal government has passed a number of laws in special education, but they also haven't covered the whole cost of it either. And usually local levies end up picking up some of that cost.
Yeah, you're right, April. Part of this, a significant part, with the ADA, handicap accessibility, comes the facilities, the room facilities, to meet the needs of our highest need individuals. And we do have a significantly challenged population that spend very little time in basic classroom settings and need a very specialized room. And we've worked as best we could to accommodate our room facilities to meet as many needs as we can with those high-need students, but we're not there. It's very challenging to take currently they're in the 52 building. And so we've kind of tried to modify a room to meet as many needs as we can. But it's a challenge. And so when it comes to equal access, that's a big one. Yes?
On this bond, is there room for growth? Are you going to like make a bigger building?
That's a great question. You know, and you see, you know, that is an awesome question. You see buildings across the state. Randy can probably speak to this better than I, but many times a school district will build for exactly what they have. And why they do that is because it's so much money to invest up front that you try to keep your costs down. And we can say that this building would be built for 300 middle school students. We would have the capacity of 300. Right now, if you take our top 3 grades, now that changes year to year, but our top 3 grades, we would have anywhere from room for growth of, 65 to 75 students. Okay? Depending on the year. Now, we do have a larger class coming up through our system that's very large, and so that would, there are 95 third graders, which is an exceptional high class for us, which would cut in on that by 20, and so now we've only got about 50 spaces available. But we are building this facility to have room for growth, so you would not need to anticipate thinking, 5 years down the road, we're already out of space. So, yes, sir.
Glenn Hudson again, I'm sorry. I saw a statistic very interesting the other day. It said that if this Pioneer School District was in Shelton, everybody who lived here was in the Shelton District, the levy rate would be higher. Is that correct?
I don't really want to get into the hypothetical what ifs, but I'll answer your question just to be fair and objective, and that's what I know. We currently pay in the Pioneer School District $233 per thousand for our local levy. We're asking for an additional $1.33 to be added to that for the bond. That would be $366 per thousand total between the levy and bond rates. And as Randy stated, our levy expires every 3 years, be up for next year. Shelton currently pays a combined rate of $5.67 between their bond and their levy. And that's just the fact.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, sir.
On a cost per square foot basis, how does this construction compare with other construction in the state?
Great question. Great question. We've worked with McGranahan architectural firm in Tacoma, and we've asked them to do a cost analysis for us, not based on the most extravagant building you build in Bellevue or downtown, Mercer Island. We've not asked for a low-level construction, bid of something that was built that could only last for 20 years. We've asked for a mid-range cost projection. We want to know what is the average cost so that we can get something that's built to the same quality as the primary school. And so they've leveled that out to be about in the middle. And we will work very hard to keep our costs down. In fact, these are decisions yet to be made, but the board and I have engaged in conversations around how do we cut design costs. We don't need a school that is noted in a national publication for being a unique, state-of-the-art institution that's downtown Bellevue. We need something that's efficient, that helps our students learn in the 21st century, and will be here 60 years from now. That's what we want. And so we don't need to design a building that's one of a kind. So we've had conversations. How can we cut costs? Hire the architect and say, take us to your 5 most prized buildings and take us through. We like that. We like that. We like that. Now put it together for us. Instead of paying an architect to design something that, they'd like to do. A one-of-a-kind building. We don't need that. We need an efficient building that is cost-effective for our taxpayers. So that's one example of ways we're going to work really hard to keep those costs down. Yes, April.
With the focus on finding something that is appropriate and really designed and exterior structure that will stand up to our Washington weather.
Absolutely. The question is, will it be appropriate to the design of the climate of our area? Absolutely. And a prime example, you look at the primary school, that design is there to stay. That design is incredible. And we'll be there 40 years from now, which will make the building 60 years old. Yes, Jim.
How long is it going to take to do the construction, and how much interference will
We project no interference. We'll do the construction around the day-to-day operation of school. We don't anticipate any increased cost by bringing in portable classrooms. We're going to design this and work, in the seasonal times to make sure we can maximize the additions at the primary school to not interfere with instruction, around the gym primarily. The building that sits out here, it sits in the middle of a field, and we'll have to, fence that off and keep school operational, which will impact where our students play for recess, but we'll come up with other avenues for that. So that's no increased cost for the day-to-day operations of our running the facility. Now, what was the first question, Jim?
How long is it going to take?
I think the best guess here is 18 to 24 months after a bond has been approved by its voters. This really would be our target, to go through the design and construction phase, anywhere from 18 to 24 months, depending upon timelines and bond sales and hiring of an architect and all of those things that have to line out perfectly. But that would be our target, Jen. Yes.
Will the design inside and out kind of match the primary building, or have that been thought about?
Yet to be determined. We will, if this passes, we'll put together a design team that will be made up of community members, staff members, board members, business leaders in our community that will be a part of that design process. Irene.
State funding. The state's going to fund some, but exactly how do they come up with that figure?
Okay. And I wanted to know, I had Gordon Beck, my director of facilities, come down and try to explain it to me. And I'm still pretty confused. Okay. But there are about 3 factors. And Gordon said, just be honest with the group, almost all 3 factors work against this community for certain reasons. One is you have lots of private homes, but not very many kids connected to the private homes, which made him to believe there might be a lot of retired people in the area. Okay? So that works against you because you have lots of private homes, but not very many kids. With as many private homes as you have, the calculation has an algorithm with homes to students, and you have a high number of homes that kind of actually less amount of students, which hurts your calculations. You would get more money from the state without calculations. Then also there is a calculation of businesses and things of that nature, which if you look around, it's more of a bedroom community versus a business community. So, and that your student population is not growing, it's pretty flat, okay? And so if you have a student population growing, it would project out, the calculation by the state would project out that you will have more students, and your calculation actually projects out flat. So you don't get any extra points for that, so you get less. So I think the 3.2 million or so equals out to about 13-14% of your bond, something like that. And where some districts may get around 30%, but it's because they're in that fast growth type of situation. And they have, their new developments that are coming in, they project that there's going to be families with kids. And it's just a state formula. We've had big arguments that there should be more money put in. The square footage is another issue that you have to put, because we actually don't put the actual cost of the square footage. We funded about, I forget, just a little over $200 a square foot. It actually costs about 15% more than that is what the actual cost is.
Didn't they take a look at the schools and put you on a list as the ones that needed it the most?
That's not how it works. You have to pass a bond. Before the state, really, they just do the formula and then you pass the bond. It's not, when we dole out the money, it is on most need. We've had enough money over the last 5 years. We've had enough money by the state because people weren't passing bonds. because of the economic times. So we've had enough money to meet all the needs of the bonds that have been passed. The only time we put them on a list is when the state doesn't have enough bond match, and they have to wait for it. But that's not been the case the last 5 years.
Okay. Galia?
I just had a question about that growth rate, because how long is that growth rate that you're looking at? Because in my 5 years, okay, because I was thinking like Pioneer, not even 30 years ago, only had 20 kids per grade, and now we have 100 kids per grade. I mean, that's pretty big growth. We went from a tiny little school to add this building, add this building, add this building, and that's how we kind of got to this place where we are.
I want you to know that I was going to bring the actual numbers with me tonight, but I want you to know that 5 years ago, you were about, I think, 25 more kids than you were this year.
Right, okay, so I see what you're saying.
And so you show that much, see, you're showing, 5 years ago, you're showing a higher number than you are today, and then you're going to be flat for the next, what they project out is 5 years.
Right.
You know, look, you know, and again, it's a good calculation guesstimate
I totally
on how the
understand.
economy is going to go.
I totally
But if you waited like 2 years, your numbers would go down and you get a little benefit for it because you'd kick up, because it was 5 years ago you were high, and 3 years ago you weren't as high. And so you kind of match up. So that's how it's calculated.
It's just interesting because that's how we kind of got to this place. You know, that's how this building, 50s, 60s, 70s, we just continued to grow so much that we had to piecemeal, like, oh, add another classroom, add another classroom, add another classroom, quick, you know. We have so many kids, and that's where we are today because we grew so fast we couldn't contain how fast we were growing.
Yeah, and there was a significant spike in the early, I believe, 90s, mid-90s, that this district grew to almost 1,000 students. And since then, we've been in somewhat of a regression, flatline state. But as the economy returns and Mason County starts to pick up again, we would anticipate those families returning to the area. So that's why I think it's so critical that, Jenny, we answer your question around, or somebody asked the question around growth. We gotta have room for capacity to grow a little bit. And so that's important. Yes, April.
Can you speak to what happens to schools if the bonds never get passed?
Okay, it was before my time, but in recent times, there's only been one district. And that district was a K-6 district, and it was called Vader School District, and it's located right outside of Winlock. It's, if you're going down I-5 and you go past Chehalis, and you're a little bit farther down and you see Winlock, and Vader would be like the next exit, and it was a community that it wasn't as big as this community, but they had, I think they were around 160 kids, and they weren't able to pass a bond. And I want you to know that I have nothing to do with condemning a building, okay? And I don't think that's where you're at today. But I'm sure you have a number of concerns of safety and issues and roasts and things. And so they ended up having to consolidate into another district, and they were absorbed. And that was 5 years ago. And we've not had any other districts that have gotten to that point. But we have rules that we would go by. If they can't be housed, then we have to work it out, and the ESD has to work out the rules. It's not a pretty process. So I'm not. You asked the question. I can only come up with Vader. That was a very small district, and they tried to pass the bond a number of times. And the county came in and said that the building is not a safe building to house students.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, you know, I think you'd have an easier time passing a bond if you could show them you got A, B, C here. This is our high-end product. You know, it's like a car. You don't go buy a car sight on saying, hey, the bank's going to give you $15,000. Go buy a car. You look at at the products available and have plans made up so people can look, hey, this sounds good to me, this is affordable, but put the bond forward, and then we'll come up with a plan to build it. That doesn't help the voter in making a decision.
We've had this actual proposal has been on the, it's been discussed for a better part of 4 or 5 years.
And how many times has it gone up for election?
This will be the fourth.
Yeah, and how many times we didn't make the 60%? 4 times.
This is the fourth time we've taken it to the voters.
That's my worry is you're pushing the one product.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, don't worry about the car. We'll show you when we get the money.
Yeah. And we've taken
ahead of time.
Over the course of 4 or 5 years, we've had lots of public meetings, lots of committee meetings, lots of input meetings where folks can come in and help, design that. That's not exactly where it started 4 or 5 years ago. That's evolved over time based on feedback, input from our community. The challenge is, to do that design work is very expensive. And we don't have, I'll just be honest, we don't have the dollars accessible to design a building in its entirety until we pass a bond.
The general idea, the one in 94 was passed, that was with all the public input on what they wanted to see in the building. And then, it was supposed to be 1 through 6, if I remember right. I think, what is it currently, 1 through 4?
It's a K3. Pre-K3.
Now, it was promised at 1 through 6, so that's where the people have a heart to talk.
Yeah.
They were sold one thing and given another, and this goes back to, federal funding and stuff,
And I've heard that concern, and I honor and accept that concern. Through my work with the board and our work with this community, the proposal that we're putting out to our taxpayers today, we can finish that job. We can finish what's promised to you, the taxpayer. We can build a 60,000 square foot 6-to-8 building that will be quality. We can add 10 classrooms. I can't speak to 20, 25 years ago on what was promised to the taxpayers. I can only speak to today. And what we're putting in front of you has been thought out and developed by, I want to anticipate hundreds of people have been a part of that design. And I put my name on the fact that I know through the work I've done, we can finish that work. What we promise you, we will deliver. Kathy?
So even though we don't have actual plans in place, we do have this diagram of the proposed building.
Correct. And cost analysis as it relates to square footage, what is the average cost per square foot? We have done that work because we can afford to do that, but that's not cheap either. But to get into the detailed work of this classroom, the SPED classroom will be here, and the music classroom will be here with this amount of educational specs, we just don't have the resources to do that level of work until we pass upon. All right, we have enough time for one more question. I promised Randy he would be back on his way home at 7:30. So anybody else? Jim?
Okay, I have a question that has to do with teachers, and my question about teachers are, they're in their scheme of things, 62 and 30 plus years and they retire. I understand the Supreme Court now is looking at doing away with that, being able to retire before retirement at 62. And I've heard here some people say, how long are these teachers going to have to be here teaching if we've got young blood to come in? So how are you going to help the older teachers be able to step out and become
It's a good question. It used to be that we used to have a 30-year retirement law in the state of Washington, and that was the Plan 1 law. And legislators saw that people were living longer and they weren't funding the retirement system, and so we came up with Plan 2. Plan 2, about 8-9 years ago, was a 65-year-old defined benefit retirement plan. And the Plan 3 would have a thing in it called gain sharing. that this extra money, that if the state made money on what was in the retirement pool, that Plan 3 people would get gain sharing. The legislature looked at that and they said, boy, that's really going to be expensive in the future. They took away gain sharing, but they gave the Plan 2 people the 62-year retirement. That is in front of the Supreme Court, and there's a decision waiting for it. There are many states, although we don't like to say this, and, you know, again, I know people don't like to hear this, but I was saying this. We are only one of about 18 to 20 states that have actually made the shift out of the Plan 1 retirement system to the Plan 2 retirement system, and now the Plan 3 retirement system, which is not a defined benefit. It's the actual employee paying half of it and the state paying half of it. And that's a cheaper retirement system for the state. Many other states still have that 30-year retirement system, and their state governments are in trouble to actually fund that. And so we made the shift. It was a difficult choice. I wasn't in the legislature then, okay? It was 1977 was the first time. My friend Dan Newell over there, he missed it by 1 year, Plan 1. And so our state is in better finances, but I will tell you it was much easier to recruit people into the teaching profession when you knew that you had a good retirement system and that we paid your health care benefits. And over the last 10 years, we've increased the cost of health care that people have to take out of their pocket. So it's harder to recruit into the educational system today because although people think the benefits are maybe Cadillac, they're really kind of Chevy type of benefits. Not that Chevy's bad, okay? You know, Chevy's good. But in the GM world, Cadillac's a little higher than the Chevy. So we have definitely adjusted down, and it is more difficult to recruit people in because of those benefit cuts.
So are we speaking on...
So it's in front of the Supreme Court.
So is there any way that you're going to speak on behalf of the older population?
That I don't have a decision on that. I'm not a legislator.
No, I know that, but I just wanted to...
Well, I'm advocating that we have to do a better job of providing benefits for teachers to get quality people into our programs.
Well, I'm just talking about letting people out of the program.
I have no answer for that.
You know, thanks again to each of you for coming out this evening. Let's give another round of